If you are over 1,000 and you are still playing this setup, we need to have a talk. On this next episode of my educational speedrun, I was surprised by what my near 1300 rated opponents played for their opening. My speedrun aims to teach you how to follow the basic principles while capitalizing on your opponent's mistakes when they don't follow the basic principles. Hope you enjoy, and let's get into it. So we start off with e4, e5, and within the third move, my opponent surprises me with the move queen to f3. I see this with pure beginner chess, trying to get that easy checkmate in 4 moves. Though I did not know that players near 1300 levels still try to play this. Now, whether it's common or not, the point should be that it should not even be a thing at all. By the time you're around this level, your opponents are not going to be falling for this. If they do, you're getting lucky, and if they don't, you're just putting yourself in a worse position for no reason. You're committing your queen really early on into the game onto a square that your knight would like to be on just for a chance at trying to checkmate in 4 moves. I just continued following the basic principles. I played the move knight f6, and then white plays knight to h3. Now, I instantly saw the reason why they played this move. Their goal is to play knight to g5 and try to set up this fried liver attack here on this pawn on f7. However, this is an example of hope chess. They're developing their knight to h3, still trying to attack this pawn on f7, hoping that I'll allow knight to g5, and my position will become complicated to defend, and that they might win material or even the game. If this ends up working out, then yes, their hope chess worked, and they end up potentially winning a pawn on f7. However, if it does not work, let's say even play a simple move like h6, just to make sure the knight can't come to g5, look at white's position. Again, we already talked about they committed their queen really early onto a square that their knight would want to be on, so because their knight cannot develop to f3, they decide to play knight to h3, and now their knight is trapped on the corner of the board with absolutely no square to go to, so they have to go backwards if they want to reroute their knights. And now, even if I ended up playing h6 in the game, white's hope at an attack is just gone. There's no way white can follow this up. Instead in the game, I decided to play the move knight to d4. Getting a little bit aggressive and capitalizing on the fact that my opponent moved their queen out early, so I want to try to attack the queen, and at the same time I'm threatening to take the pawn on c2 with a beautiful fork on the king and the rook. This forces my opponent to go all the way back to d1, which means they're just losing tempo out of the opening, their pieces are so out of sync, and they spent 4 moves trying to make some hope chess playing work, and now they're back to square one. So again, I keep following the basic principles. I'm trying to get my king saved, so I play bishop to c5, just getting my pieces out. In here, I open up my light square bishop, and I'm threatening to take this knight on h3. After bishop g5, I decided that I wanted to go for this trade. The 2 main reasons why I decided to do that was because it doubles my opponent's pawns. Now, double pawns are a stereotype. They're not always bad. It depends on the position and the pawn structure. However, in this position they are bad because they're double pawns on the corner of the board and they have no supporting pawns near them. And if my opponent decides to castle on the king's side, they're walking into this completely open g-file, and this pawn becomes a target that I can pressure. So given that I already have this advantage, I'm trying to play a little bit aggressive here to try to capitalize on the fact that my opponent has an open king side, while their king is still stuck on the center of the board. The safest side for them to castle on is on the queen side, however they have to get their knight out and bring their queen out before doing so that gives me a little bit of time. So trying to capitalize on this time, I decide to attack the bishop, playing h6, so that the bishop either has to move back, which they would have lost time again, they have to take my knights, and after this trade, my queen is lined up on this beautiful f-file, threatening to target this pawn on f2. Some nasty discoveries getting prepared there. Or they have to play what they did, which is move their bishop back, which allows me to keep getting a little bit aggressive with my position, playing the move to g5. Now, if we're looking at king safety, my opponent's king is definitely less safe than my king. If I ever do decide that I want to castle, I can just bring my queen up and castle. However, I'm trying to capitalize on this lost time that my opponent has given me to make something happen in this position before I allow them to develop, get their king safe, and then I have to work harder to try to make something happen. So after bishop g3, I notice that this bishop is trapped. It can't go backwards, it can't go forward. So all I really need to do is run this pawn up the board, threatening h4, winning a bishop. They play the move h4 here, and now this bishop is essentially a tall pawn on g3. Look at it, it blends in with these pawns. It can't do anything. g4 is played, just to make sure that this bishop cannot move, and now this pawn on h4 becomes a liability to this bishop. The bishop can't even try to reroute because this pawn could easily hang and my queen has this nice diagonal looking at it. I'm also threatening knight to f3 check, making sure that this king has to move and therefore they can't ever castle, and just adding an extra attacker on this pawn on h4. Here my opponent plays to move f4. A really bold move here. Desperate times calls for desperate measures, I guess, so they were trying to play f4 hoping I would trade and that this bishop could maybe come to g5 or have some life again. Here I have quite a few nice options. I know the meme is en passant is forced in chess, so I was debating just doing it for the sake of this video. However, I felt if I played en passant, I didn't like the idea that after a move like c3, my knight would have to move, and then I feel like I'm just going to lose this pawn. And I'm opening up the position a little bit again for my opponent, and I didn't feel like this was necessary. So I decided to play knight to f3 check, following through with my original plan, making sure the king can't castle, keeping this bishop closed, and adding an attacker to this pawn on h4. King comes up. Here I want to target this pawn, but the bishop's in the way, so I thought now was a good time to open up this position. I don't want the bishop to sit here on g5. Now, with the king in the center of the board, I instantly had the pattern recognition that if I can find a way to get my queen to f2, that's checkmate. And I saw an easy route to do that would be to target this pawn on h4, because I already have two potential attackers hitting the pawn. So if I don't want bishop g5 to be a thing, and I want to get my queen into the game, all I need to do is move this knight out of the position. So I played knight to d7, setting up my queen to take this pawn, and I'm also setting up to potentially play knight d to e5 if I need, to support this knight on f3, and connect my knights. Connecting knights is always a good thing. And here my opponent just fell apart. They allowed me to take the pawn on h4, and they just allowed me to checkmate. Now, this was already losing. They could try to run their king to safety, or maybe try to defend h4 a little better, or at least just defend the checkmate threat, but it's hard to see what the best play is to try to survive, and I was just able to win in 16 moves. So I capitalized on my opponent's lack of development, lack of space, and poor decision making to play queen f3 on move 3 pretty fast, and it was pretty easy to do so. If you are one of those people out there that still plays that setup as white, please stop playing it. It's for your own benefit. You don't want to build up bad habits trying to play hope chess so early. You really want to try to follow the basic principles, develop your pawns and pieces towards the center, get your king safe, and go from there. Hope this video was helpful, and thank you for watching. Bye-bye.